because it's an oak.
Oh.
And one of several kinds of oak trees. Now this surely wasn't planted here.
Laurel, like a laurel leaf?
Well, it looks like laurel leaf. I think that there are a good number of oaks that are.
Never seen one.
How did you tell? How could you tell it was an oak? Did you just look at the leaf?
Because I'm a botanist.
Right, but you looked at the leaves.
Yeah.
That was your big identifier.
Yeah. I'm a botanist that would think it's more likely what they call laurel oak. But I think this is willow oak. It's more common. Mm-hmm. It's just that these leaves are a little bit broad for most of the willow oaks that you see. Yeah. It's mostly in the coastal plain. It doesn't get into the Piedmont too much. But it really loves a swampy setting. It can also be found on higher ground. Quercus phellos. Quercus is Quercus. And phellos doesn't mean fellows. It means cork. I think Linnaeus named it. I don't know why he named it cork, because maybe he thought that cork can come from it. But phellos is Phellos. That kind of phellos. Simple leaves. The leaves are one at a time on the stem. So there's a leaf, and 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 there's a leaf. All right, and all of this growth, see it's green? This is all since it warmed up. So this is all 2022 right here. And it'll keep growing, if all things go well, from this apical bud that's at the very end of the stem next year. So alternate leaves that are simple. There's only one blade, just like with calycanthus. And we don't see any flowers on it because this plant is probably too young to be flowering. But when you have a big, this is red bud. When you have a big enough red bud, they'll make flowers. It's real interesting the way they make their flowers. They're typically right on the stem, on the wood. Yeah. Sometimes even on a trunk. The deal about this one so far is that its leaves are what we call compound. So each leaflet is divided, each leaf, is divided into a number of leaflets. And so the blade itself is divided. It's not just one single blade like the red bud. So we say that this is a compound leaf. Now this is interesting too, in that there's always going to be two of these compound leaves at each stem attachment, that is, at each node of the stem. So it's real easy to tell if you got opposite leaves like this one, or alternate leaves like the red bud. Now, some people, I get this a lot, some people will say, well, why isn't this 5 leaves? That's a good question. Well, here's the way you tell that. You got to look at this thing pretty closely, and if you look, let me just say that every leaf has a bud at its base. Every leaf, this is a rule, every leaf has a bud at its base. So if you look for a bud, there's no bud right there, and there's no bud right there, and there's no, let me see, there might be buds. No, there's just no buds there, and this one doesn't have a bud. Well, let's look down here, and aha, there's a bud, a furry brown bud, right between the leaf stalk, you can see it, and the rest of the stem. So all of this is a leaf, not 5 leaves, and they're opposite. Now, the leaflets are also opposite. So are the leaves. That is, they're opposite on the stem midrib. So this is a ash tree. Ashes are real pretty trees. Always opposite leaves, and they're compound. And white oak. And I think they're right.
Aren't all white oaks the rounded leaves?
That's right, the white oak group. And you can see that this is all the oaks of the world have alternate leaves. So there's one leaf here, and one leaf here, and one leaf here. And then it gets a little bit complicated, because this looks like 4 leaves all coming out of the same place, don't they? Not to worry. Most of the time, the oaks, when they produce leaves at the very tip of a stem, they'll be closely clustered together. So each one of these leaves does have its own bud.
Yeah.
It's just that they're closely clustered at the end of the branch. And you can see this in the winter time because if you look at the end of the branch, you'll see those closely clustered buds.
Oh.
Meanwhile, all the others are just going to be one at a time. So this is white oak, Quercus alba. Alba means white. And it's called white oak because a lot of times people talk about the bark is sort of white. Enormous one next to the Matt LeConte College at UofSC, the biggest one in town, I think. Quercus alba. And it makes these wonderful acorns that the critters go crazy for. And here's our dogwood, which is real easy to recognize, especially because of its bark.
What about
Har, har, har.
Oh my gosh.
Bark, 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 bark.
Yes, yes.
Sorry, that was I planned to do that just to make him feel better.
I know you
Got
do.
me.
So, sure enough, on older plants, taller trees, the bark will be characteristically checkered, dark, almost black, and checkered, small, checkery kind of thing. Dogwood bark. Now, it's got opposite leaves, and they're simple leaves, so they're boring leaves. They shape like overinflated footballs. And they have this beautiful series of secondary veins on the backside that are very prominent. And then a little point at the tip. The botanists have figured out that this species is actually more accurately placed in a different genus. That there's still a genus of dogwoods that we call Cornus, but this one is not particularly related to them. So this belongs to the genus, do you know what?
I've seen it, but I don't remember.
Benthamidia. So, I mean, you can still call it Cornus Florida, but the more accurate way of referring to it scientifically is Benthamidia.
What?
These are probably the biggest simple leaves of any plant in North America.
Oh.
No, not necessarily on this individual, but these are pretty darn big leaves.
They are big.
Like a banana tree on
It looks
Yeah.
prehistoric
And they have,
It
look at the
does.
bottom, the base of the
with the
leaf.
dinosaurs.
It has 2 little earlobes.
It's very Jurassic looking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Jurassic magnolia.
Flower bud right there. This is great. I didn't know this was here. This is
There's
fantastic.
another one right there.
Look at it. So this is a native species, but this had to be planted here. And this is a magnolia. So this is what they call a deciduous magnolia, in that all the leaves will fall off. Now, southern magnolia, the leaves don't fall off, so that's an evergreen one. But this is in a group that has deciduous leaves. And it's blooming now, and you can see that it sort of looks like a regular old southern magnolia flower, except that there aren't as many petals, and the innards are kind of similar. There's a a group, hundreds of stamens here, and then this cone-like thing at the top. Oh look, there's some nice sunlight, maybe. Are the pistils. So it's also kind of a primitive flower, and it has lots and lots of parts that aren't fused together, like say a honeysuckle flower. Notice also that the petals have these purple blotches down there, which is pretty cool, and I don't know what that means, but now I want to do a smell test. I can already... This is also a magnolia, and it is not totally deciduous, but it's partially deciduous. Thus, these are last year's leaves right here. So these are this year's leaves. So you can see it's got both year's leaves on it. Eventually these are going to fall off pretty soon. But these are, you know, these will continue until winter time, and then they'll stay, some of them will stay on for a while. So this is Magnolia virginiana. And on a larger tree, well, it doesn't have to be particularly larger, but a different tree. Let me show you here. The leaves, typically on the older leaves, will be white down below, whitish. So later on in the summer, when you're looking at this thing, these leaves are going to be significantly brighter and whiter. So in the breeze, when this thing blows around like a storm's coming up, you see this green and white. Very impressive. So this is a native one. This one is here. This wouldn't have been planted. Magnolia virginiana, and it's called Sweet Bay. Yeah, yesterday we got into a big bay discussion.
Yeah, we did.
Different kinds of bay trees. But this is a Magnolia virginiana. It likes it usually kind of damp. Poplar or yellow wood. It's called yellow wood because if you like start cutting into the bark, it'll be the innards of the yellow, bright yellow.
It's more here.
Oh, really?
A little bit older than that.
Well, this is a bit better. So most of the time, when this stuff is blooming, it's way up high.
Oh, that's the
So you usually don't see the flowers unless they've fallen. So this is also in the magnolia family. Yellow poplar. Lots of flower parts with no fusion or very little fusion. But these petals are kind of funny because they've got an orange blotch on them too. And then look at this. These are the stamens. Here's some more stamens right there. The stamens, and they produce the pollen. So this cone-like thing in the middle is the gynoecium. That's all the female parts of the flower. So this consists of probably 45 small pistils that are spiraled around, ready to receive pollen. In the wintertime, you can still see these things, these old flowers. You might just see them way up high though. But they're sticking up in the like that, and all that'll be left is this
Just
cone,
that cone.
just that little cone, because the seeds will have fallen away, or they're falling away. So that's Liriodendron tulipifera, and it's the silliest name. Lirio means lily, dendron means tree,